So on Thursday, we had a definition of Reish Lakish, his shita, here on Daf Lamed Heyam and Beis, is that it's not enough to say Lemafreya, that later on we'll clarify whether or not she fell for Yibum, and therefore whether his Chalitza was valid or not when we see whether she carries to full term and she delivers a viable baby or it's a Nephi. That's not enough according to Reish Lakish. But our Mishnah says, quote, Ein havlad shel kayama. You have it, this is the third of the white lines. Ein havlad shel kayama. If the vlad turns out to be a nefel, then the chalitza is viable, is valid. For who asur b'krovosera, the asur b'krova. The choletz is not allowed to marry the relatives of the chalutza, and she, the chalutza, cannot marry the relatives of the choletz. Upsala mina kahuna, and this chalitza disqualifies her for kahuna. Why is that so? Unless you say that the chalitza is valid. So Rabbi Yochanan here on Daf Lamed Heyam and Beis is proving that a chalitza to a muberes is actually a valid chalitza. Again, we'll only know for sure that it's valid when she chas v'shalom gives birth to a nefa. But if it's ein havlad shel kayama, the Mishnah establishes that chalitza is valid. Notice again, we have to wait until she miscarries. But once she miscarried, then Lemafreya Rabbi Yochanan understands the Mishnah to say we validate the chalitza, and therefore, since the vlad is ein shel kayama, who asur b'krovosera. Yeah, you have the place here, the third of the wide lines, right? Who asur b'krovosera, v'hi asur b'krova, upsala mina kahuna. Is bishlei l'didia damina shechalitzas muber shma chalitza mishmachi pasel. Yochanan says, I have a clear-cut proof from the Mishnah that even a chalitza of a muberes is a valid chalitza. I mean, we don't know it's valid, but we'll find out later when she gives birth to a vlad that is an ephah. And therefore, since the chalitza is valid, it generates a psul of kahuna, like any chalutza. El v'daf, but according to Reish Lakish the Omar, chalitza muberes lo shmei chalitza, my psul kahuna. And I was thinking that this might come under what's called reach haget. Reach haget means that sometimes a man delivers a get to his wife, and it's not a kosher get; it's invalid. But nevertheless, she can no longer marry a Kohen because the word gets out that she had a get, that she received a get. Here also, Omar Lei, Reish Lakish says, "Mirabana l'chumra b'al." The psul l'kahuna that is formulated here in the Mishnah is not a din d'oraisa, because this chalitza muberes, according to Reish Lakish, is an invalid chalitza because of ben ein lo ayino. However, the Rabbanon made a gzeira that even a chalitza muberes generates a psul l'kahuna. So if she would marry a Kohen, she'd be in violation of an Isur Rabbanon. And the chash is that maybe the spectators would think that this chalitza is a valid chalitza. They don't even know that she was muberes. Nobody has to know that. And therefore, if she would go ahead and get married a Kohen, they're going to assume that a chalitza is muteres l'kahuna. How can you allow her to marry a Kohen when they think this is a valid chalitza? Because they don't know that she was muberes. So in their minds, in the eyes of the spectators, a perfectly excellent chalitza, perfectly valid. And now the Rav Mesader is marrying her off to a Kohen? Is it possible that that a Kohen's allowed to marry a chalutza? Not a grusha, but a chalutza. Ika diamri. Others say that it was Reish Lakish who asked the kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, not the way we had it. Eisvei Reish Lakish to Rabbi Yochanan, it says in our Mishnah that hacholetz liyavimto, if he gives chalitza to his Yevamot, and then nimtzeis mu'uberes, it turns out she was mu'uberes. Ein avlad shel kayama hu choletz, hacholetz also b'krov v'seshach u'zvi asur b'krov shel hacholetz hu psala min ha'kahuna. Says Reish Lakish bishleim l'didi yamina chalitzas mu'uberes lo shmei chalitza hainu diktani pasla min ha'kahuna lechumra. Also min ha'kahuna. For lo ktani eina tzricha chalitza min ha'achin o vidach eina tzricha chalitza min ha'achin mi boile. According to me, Reish Lakish says, I understand the chiddush here of the Mishnah is that even though this is not a valid chalitza, but midrabanan they made it into a valid chalitza, she can no longer marry a Kohen. That's a chumra b'alma. But according to that, right? And therefore, I can explain why the Mishnah doesn't mention that eina tzricha chalitza min ha'achin. Because in truth, she needs chalitza min ha'achin. But according to you, Rabbi Yochanan, that the chalitza itself is a valid chalitza, why does the Tana, why is he satisfied by just mentioning the din of chalitza generating an isra on the krovim and passing off a kahuna? He doesn't mention a word about the fact that she no longer needs a chalitza. That should be, it's like ikar chasam min ha'sefer. If the Tana would have wanted to tell me the main chiddush here, he should have told me that she doesn't need another chalitza because this chalitza is valid. We'll already figure out that if the chalitza is a valid chalitza, that she can't marry his krovim and she's possible. Amalei, so Rabbi Yochanan responds to Reish Lakish, Eino chinam. You're right. The Tana should have told me the bigger chiddush that in the case of chalitzas muberes, that chalitza's sharing, she doesn't need another chalitza from the other brothers. Why does the Tana only mention the din of pasla lekahuna? He doesn't mention that she doesn't need. Just 1 second. According that she needs chalitza min ha'achin, right? Because her chalitza according to Rabbi Yochanan is not valid. Is ivy the Tani Reisha? Since in the case of the Reisha of chalitza v'imta v'nimtzis v'beres yolda vlad shel kayama lo psala, that chalitza is completely invalid, but she actually carried to term, gave birth to a viable child. And then the Tana couldn't have said that she needs chalitza because once she gives birth, then there's no nefila for yibum, there's no zika, and therefore there's no chalitza. So since in the Reisha, which is the case of Yolda Vlad Shel Kayoma, the Mishnah says lo pas. Therefore, Tani Nami Sefer Psola, in the Sefer where she gave birth to a stillborn. So the Mishnah follows suit with the same terminology of Psola. Psola means that now the chalitza is valid because she gave birth to a nefel, and her chalitza is a chalitza kshera, and therefore she's psul l'kuhu. So in truth, again, Rabbi Yochanan is molded that the Mishnah should have said eina tzricha chalitza to replace the first chalitza, but the Mishnah was focused on that halacha of the Reisha, namely where the pasal l'kuna lo pasal l'kuna. So the Reisha lo pasal l'kuna because she gave birth to a vlad shel kayama, and the Sefer that she gave birth to a nefel is therefore pasal l'kuna. And now we have another kasha of Rabbi Yochanan. Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. In our Mishnah, in the case where he went ahead and he married her, and he was Mekayim what he thinks of mitzvah Yibum. Then it turns out that she's Muberes. And the Vlad is a Vlad Shal Kayam. So he really had a relationship with Achos, with Eishes Achim, Erev. But in Eina Vlad Shal Kayam Yikayim, we're not going to force him, the Yavam, to divorce his wife if the Vlad turns out to be a Nefa, because then the Yibum was a valid Yibum because she really fell for Yibum. Her husband, his brother, left her childless, or didn't leave any of his own children. So Bishlem, I can explain, says Rabbi Yochanan, this Mishnah. The Amina. In other words, I'm going to say the following. Chalitzas me'uberesh me'chalitzu bias me'uberesh me'bia is mishum hachi ktani yikayim. Meaning that if the Vlad turns out to be a nefel, then the Yavam could continue being married to the wife of his late brother. The Eino Tzarech Lashuv the Lavo Aleh. In other words, he was already Mekayim the mitzvah of Yibum, and even if he doesn't have another intimate relationship with her, nevertheless, she is his wife. He was Konaha while she was a Muberes, and there's no need for another bia after it turns out that the baby was an Ephel. He wants to divorce her, he's allowed to divorce her. He was already Mekayim the mitzvah, the bia Rishona. According to Reish Lakish the Amrit, we said that chalitzas muberes, lo shmei chalitza, ubias muberes lo shmei bia. It means he wasn't kona, the other was not kona with that bia rishona because she was muberes. So why does the Mishnah say that he's allowed to remain married to her? The Mishnah should have said that he's got to replace that bia with another bia. So again, what's the kasha here on Reish Lakish? Reish Lakish holds the chalitza and the bia is not valid, and he was not koner as a yavam. Now she gives birth to a nefel. Am I correct? Ein avlad shel kayoma yikayim. What's yikayim? Yikayim implies that there's already a marriage. It's valid. He was Mekayim mitzvah Yibum, he was Konahar, and now Yikayim, he can continue maintaining that relationship. We're not going to force a get. But according to you, is Yachzav Yibol Yikayim Yibol? It should have said, let him do a new bia, because the first bia is not valid to create a kinyan of Yibum. It's a very subtle question. Instead of Yikayim, it's said Yatsa V'Yivol V'Yikayim. He needs a new beer. So the Gemara says, Reish Lakish, Ma Yikayim Yatsa V'Yivol V'Yikayim. That's exactly what the Mishnah has in mind. Lo Sagi V'Lav Chachmi. What does it mean, lo sagir v'lav chachmi? I see there's an issue in the Girsa, but he says there's no other possibility. He cannot part of a get because he wasn't Kona B'Bir Rishon. So a get would be absolutely meaningless. Again, why can't he give a chalitza? Sharei Ba'aleh. What is that? Why is that generated? What does it mean, Sharei Ba'aleh? I don't get it. Can that be a... Oh, Jeff, you are. When does he fly? Tonight?
No, not flying anyway.
Oh, you're not flying. Very good. No. I got mixed up. Somebody is going on a trip to America. Just take that down. Okay. One second, John. Oh, perfect. So Jeff, okay. When you come back, I'll just clue you in here a little bit of what's going on. So we're talking about a case where a man died without children. We'll call him a man, and his wife falls for evil to Shimon. Shimon was miyaving her, but what he didn't know, because he jumped the gun, so to speak, he should have waited, was that his brother's wife, the Yevamot, was actually pregnant at the time. Now, down the line, what happened was that she gave birth to a Nephah. So despite the fact that she was pregnant, that pregnancy was aborted in a way that there's no zera left for the late husband, for Reuben. Now, you and I would have said that in that case, since Shimon jumped the gun, I mean, he shouldn't have done so, but he was liyabim her, right? Let's call her roughly, it's liyabim her. That yibum should be valid, because she really did fall for yibum, because his late brother Reuven had no children. Yet we couldn't have known that at that time. They didn't have ultrasounds, right? Reish Lakish comes along and he says that Bia is not Kona. Why? Because she was a Mubaris. Now, as we look at that as a frame of time, isolated, and he was Miyabim a Mubaris. Now, Eliyahu Hanavi maybe could have told us, again, we don't have an ultrasound, so he could have told us that lot is not going to survive, unfortunately, the full term. But we didn't have access to that information. So Reish Lakish says that there's no yibum unless you're absolutely sure that there should be yibum. And that's called uben elo ayin bum. You have to be sure that he left no zera. But in this case of a muberes, you're not sure. So now, what happens according to this is the Shita Reish Lakish. What happens now? So I was telling John that my intuition says that let him give a chalitza now if he so desires, because that Maisa Bia was not a valid yibum because she was a muberes. But yet the Gemara says no, he cannot. There is no possibility of giving her a chalitza. He has to bol shenis. He has to have another bia. Even shalokana b'bia rishona ishalayis muberes, and bias muberes lo shmei bia. As far as yibum is concerned, this is not a valid yibum, according to again Reish Lakish. Is ein adam yachol lahotzi es yevimto beget. Okay, all right. He can't give her a get because she's a yevama. You can't give a get to a yevama. You have to give a chalitza. But af chalitza any yachol lahotzi. Why? Sharei ba alel. Because he already had beer with her. And therefore, after she gives birth to a Nephel, he has no other option but to again repeat his yibum, his beer. And I can't figure out why he can't give a chalitza. I have a feeling that maybe Reish Lakish thought this is the Rabbana. I don't know.
So we're back in the fourth part.
Yeah, but here's the story. Let me just explain what's going on here. And
Harry, but
so Ika di Amri, again, we're going to have to come back and see, maybe Reish Lakish is on a Derabbana level, so on a Deraisa level, maybe he was Konahar, and on a Derabbana level, he wasn't Konahar, and therefore, he can't give her a get because she's still in the Parsha of Yibu, and there's a Zika. But on a Derabbana level, he cannot rely on that Bia as a Bias Kinyan, as if he fulfilled the bits of Yibum, because at the time that he did do that Bia, she was a Muberes, and Reish Lakish doesn't want to recognize that Bia as a Bias Yibum. So therefore, basically, he has no other option but to have another relationship with her, a second intimacy, follow up with a Bia, and then he could be Megarish over again. And Ika di Amri, now the Gemara offers another possibility. Okay, I'll just read it very quickly. That Eisvei Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, that the same kasha that we thought Rabbi Yochanan was raising against Reish Lakish was just the reverse. It was Reish Lakish who was objecting to Rabbi Yochanan. Right? It says in the Mishnah, Ein Havlad Shal Kayama, if she miscarried, Yikayim. Says Reish Lakish Bishleim L'Didit Amina, I hold that Chalitzas Muberes Lo Shma Chalitza Ubias Muberes Lo Shma Bia Hainu Diktoni Yikayim. And what does Yikayim mean? Yachzor v'yivol v'yikayim. Pelosagi v'lavhochi, as we said before, there's no other option. El l'didach, but according to you, Rabbi Yochanan, that chalitzas muberes shma chalitza. Why did the Tana say Yikayim? Oh, he's learning that the types of the translation of the word Yikayim means to be Mekayim the mitzvah Yibum. He already was Mekayim the mitzvah Yibum, and therefore Yachal Garshim. So the language shouldn't have been Mekayim, go ahead and fulfill the mitzvah Yibum. That's more appropriate for Reish Lakish, but rather it should have said Rotzi Yotzi. If he wants to, we can now divorce her because she's his full-fledged wife because he was already Mekayim the mitzvah Yibum. Rotzi Yikayim, if he wants, he can be Mekayim her and continue in that marriage, having fulfilled the mitzvah of Yibum. That's what it should have said. Okay, then, so we'll stop here, even though it's in the middle of a sugya, but I'll go ahead and fulfill my obligation.
I lost my.
The third parak, we're on Chaf. We just started Chaf Zayin Amram. Okay, then? All right. So